Hey, what's up? This is Chosen, and in honor of the new dungeon boss, and new mechanic coming to the game around ascending our artifacts, we are going to need to farm up the oils to do so. And in order to farm the boss that is going to give us those oils, we need champions that can place sleep consistently. So what I'm going to do in this video is walk through the different champions that have the ability to place sleep. That way you know what your options are out there, and maybe some champions who you used to ignore that you may want to think about building, especially as we come up to CVC here in a few days. Maybe a good opportunity to spend some resources on building one of these champions to help you in this new dungeon before it launches. So let's get into it. Alrighty, now as we get started, we'll kind of work our way up. We'll start with the commons and uncommons and stuff, and we'll work up to the legendaries. Now, ironically enough, in the Undead Horde, one of the most famous commons in the game, the good old Death Knight does have the ability here on the A1 to attack one enemy and place a sleep for one turn. So hey, if you are a new player, you do have to be level like 38 to run into the oil dungeon. But hey, worth knowing what all of our options are out there. And there is actually another one here in Hellhound that has no ability except for this. It is just a default ability that will place a sleep 100% guaranteed as long as it is a critical. So yeah, a couple commons that are able to do it actually. And then there are actually no uncommons that do a sleep ability at all in the game. There is no hidden gem like Armiger or something that places a sleep. So let's just dive into the rares, and I'll try to kind of loosely go in alphabetical order here. Arcanist is a rare in the Knight Revenant that has an A1 with a decently reliable chance to sleep. I believe you could book this up to 40% on the default ability. Then we also get some heals here, you know, the AoE 2-turn continuous heals. So could be a decent budget option here for diving into the oil dungeon. And the Knight Revenant have another rare in Crimson Slayer on the A1. Now this is super reliable. You've got attack 3 times at random, which in that boss fight is going to hit the boss every time, and each hit is going to be a 50% chance. So a very reliable sleep on the A1. You do have to be careful because there is turn meter reduction, and that dungeon is going to punish this if you do not prepare for it accordingly. And then good old Diabolist, a farmable champion from the campaign that a lot of you will be familiar with and have seen probably in your journeys at some point in raid if it dropped in the campaign and all that. But we do have an A1 that is going to place a sleep with a 20% chance, and then you are going to be getting an increased speed on all allies for a 3-turn cooldown and turn meter fill. But remember to be careful for the decreased turn meter again here as well. So a decent budget option again here in Diabolist. There is a void rare in the High Elves called Interceptor that has an A1 that places decreased speed, and then the A2, this is going to be a 5-turn cooldown even when fully booked. So I don't anticipate this one being a very good option. This champion has obviously not kept up with the power creep of raid, but does have a sleep here on the A2, so worth noting. And another campaign farmable warrior, we have got the famous Muckstalker. Now Muckstalker does have an A2 that just places a sleep debuff for 2 turns if the target has no active buffs. Could be decently reliable in the right team, and Muckstalker is a farmable option just like Diabolist that will have the ability to also block buffs and heal himself and stuff like that, while also placing the sleep on the A2, which books to a 2-turn cooldown if you're willing to invest in that. There's also a void rare in the Dark Elves called a Retainer, but this one is not going to be a very reliable sleep. It is on the A3, and it's going to be decrease the target's turn meter by 50%. Again, could be risky. And then if the turn meter is fully depleted, you're going to place a sleep for 1 turn, and it's also a 4-turn cooldown. So I don't anticipate Retainer being very good for filling that role, but does have a sleep here on the A3. Now, Seducer as a void rare in the Undead Hordes is actually one of the more decent rares in the game, just for general utility, a decent champion for some early accounts to invest in, and we'll actually be getting a little bit of a power increase with the release of this new dungeon, because we've got an A1 with a decently reliable sleep. I believe that's 45% to place a sleep, and then a Seducer is a little bit more tanky than usual because he's going to scale with defense and also has some other decent utility in his kit as well. So this is definitely an option that I would recommend for some of the more early accounts out there that are going to be trying to get into that oil dungeon as soon as possible if you happen to have a Seducer. And I believe this is the last rare, or at least the last one that I could find in my research that places asleep. The last rare here in Vagabond from the new faction. We've got the A1 with a 20% default to place asleep. If you're willing to invest books, I believe it goes up to 40%. Not going to be quite as good as Seducer, I don't think, but does have block buffs and all that. But this boss is going to cleanse itself. So yeah, I don't know, but could be, you know, at least an option to consider for some of the very budget teams. Now we move on from the rares to the epics, and there's going to be a couple of them. So we'll start with Cage Breaker here in the Ogre and Tribes. Now, Cage Breaker is an interesting one because we've got an A1 that's going to place a defense break. It's not perfectly reliable, but it is an A1 defense break, and it's the big version. And then right here, if we book it, we've got a 3-turn cooldown, 4 times at random sleep. So that's going to be very, very reliable. It's going to be a 4-hitter. You're probably going to get the sleep proc, especially if you've booked it up to a 50% chance. So could be a worthwhile option. The A3 is maybe not perfect. We're not going to be proccing that effect of getting kills and stuff, but at least does have the ability to defense break and also sleep. Then there is Maeve in the Barbarians. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because we've got an A1 that is going to be a very reliable sleep. It's 70%. And then we're also going to get a chance to grant an extra turn if the sleep is placed. So we could possibly crank out a bunch of turns here with Maeve, constantly sleeping with the A1 and then doing something else. But probably not going to get a whole lot of value out of the stun and the other stuff on the kit here because we're not going to be getting kills in a boss fight. So Maeve had some potential, but outside of the A1 and snowballing some turns, maybe not going to be super amazing. Then lastly, in the epics, we've got Thenasil. Now, I think Thenasil, if I had to make an early prediction, is going to be a pretty good one for budget accounts out there, like non-legendary options, people looking for non-legendary options. Thenasil is actually a champion that was pretty decent back in the early days of Raid, has kind of been power crept a little bit and isn't used super often anymore, but does have the A1 here. And look at that, we can book that up. What is that? 15 plus 20. So we're getting 35%. It starts at 15. So we can book this up to about 50%, it looks like, on the A1 to place a sleep. Very reliable. We also get increased defense and the heal all allies based on this champion's max HP. That's a very good ability. We need to bring heals to recover some of that destroyed HP in the fight. And then we've got the AoE, decreased duration of all enemy buffs. May not be super viable, but we're mostly looking for the A1 and the A2. And then Thenasil has a pretty decent base speed as well. So I do think we'll see some of the more early and mid game accounts maybe considering building a Thenasil for the oil dungeon. Then we've got a couple legendaries that are going to do the sleep, and the one that I discussed after Roxum is going to be one of the best champions in the game. Do you know who it is? But it'll be definitely a must-use probably for everybody who is lucky enough to have this champion. But anyway, Roxum does do it. It's not the most reliable sleep in the world. You can see here it says has a 75% chance. You can book it up to 100 of placing a sleep debuff on the target for 1 turn when attacking without Veil or Perfect Veil. So gonna be a little bit hard to do because Roxum can kind of be weird and place it on himself and stuff, so might not be the most reliable sleep, but at least something to take note of. And then lastly, do you know who I was talking about? It is none other than Siphi, the Lost Bride, right here. You can see mine is grayed out. Yeah, I am not lucky enough to have Siphi or Necrit. Of course, the Void Lego that I pull is Little Miss Annie. But anyway, we've got Siphi right here with the A1 that has a massive 100% booked up chance to sleep if the target's turn meter is equal to or above 50%, and it cannot be resisted. Now, also remember, we're gonna heal all targets by 5% of max HP if the target's turn meter is below 50%. So something to keep in mind is that the sleep is only going to occur if the turn meter is equal to above 50%. So Siphi is typically built in very high speed, so probably going to be cranking out enough turns to be pretty reliable on that A1 sleep. And I don't really need to educate you all on how amazing Siphi is. She's been regarded as one of the best champions of the game ever since she was added to the game, and that hasn't really changed. I anticipate anybody that has her is probably going to be utilizing her in the oil dungeon. So okay, that is the champions that do a targeted sleep, but there are also champions that do an AoE sleep, and that would still be good enough for this dungeon, obviously, because the AoE is still going to be a single target. It's just a kind of a different version of the attack. So I want to start off with the first one being a demon spawn rare in Marquise. And for Marquise, it's going to be on the A3 right here, the AoE that can be booked up to a 50% chance to place a sleep on a 3-turn cooldown. You also get a little bit of a decreased speed and a little bit of self-sustain here from the Void rare Marquise. And that is actually the only common, uncommon, or rare that has the ability to do the AoE sleep. So now we want to talk about some of the epics, and you will be very familiar with the first one. We have got an Allure. Now, Allure is famous for the decreased turn meter on the A1, which again is going to be super rough, but Allure does have the ability to do the AoE sleep right here on the A2, but it does have a qualifier, places a sleep debuff for 1 turn on targets under decreased defense. Chancellor Yasmin of the Bannerlords has this A3 here with a 50% chance of removing all buffs from all enemies. It can be booked up to a 75% chance, and then we're also going to place a sleep for 1 turn on enemies who have active buffs still after that attack. I don't anticipate Chancellor Yasmin to be used a ton, but does have heal and sleep here along with the speed aura, so could be a decent budget option. But the thing is, you know, we're looking for reliable sleep, so this 4 turn cooldown on the book, and it's still not even 100% chance, and like the qualifiers, we're probably looking for something a little bit more reliable than that. Now, Canelia is another new epic to the game that we've seen some interesting strategies come out, and the A2 is a 3 turn cooldown, 80% chance to place a sleep on all enemies for 1 turn, and then whenever an enemy loses a sleep debuff placed by the skill, has a 50% chance of replacing it with a fear for 1 turn instead. I don't think that's going to be great in the relevancy of this boss fight, but Canelia could be an interesting one to watch out for some fun strategies in the new oil dungeon. And of course, the good old Seer. A lot of people forget that Seer does not only do a great job nuking based on buff removal, but also after that is going to have a 50% chance of placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn on all enemies, and then the chance of placing the sleep increases by 5% for each buff removed and inflicts less damage on bosses. So we'll see. We'll have to see. It might not be the most reliable thing in the world in terms of sleeping, but Seer does have it on the Karma Burn ability. And one of the best epics in the game to build for new accounts, Tyrell, also has it on the A2. If the target is under a decreased attack debuff, it will place a sleep for 1 turn right here on the A2. Now that is a 4 turn cooldown, so not going to be the most reliable thing based on the cooldown and the qualifiers, but Tyrell does have the ability to do it. Then the last epic in this category of the more AoE sleeping is Zelata. Now, Zelata actually has 2 different ways to sleep. You've got the AoE sleep here on a 5 turn cooldown when booked, which is a little bit unfortunate, but also super reliable here on the A1. Going to be very consistent because we can book this up to a 20 plus to a 40% chance here on the A1. And then we also get an A2 that's going to place shield and continuous heal, which could be very handy. Now, worth noting that some of the shield can be ignored, if I remember right, by some of the mechanics of the boss, but Zelata does have a very reliable way to continually place sleep with the A1 and the A3. And then lastly, to round out the list, there are a couple different legendaries that place it. Now, Harvest Jax is a little bit weird because you've got has a 75% chance that you can book up to 100% of placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn if True Fear is not placed here on his ability. So Harvest Jack, he could be decent, maybe, but you know, the triple hitter and stuff, but yeah, I like, even though he does place the sleep, I don't see him getting a ton of use, at least with my first impression of how the dungeon's gonna work. And then good old Prince Kymar, similar to Sify. I don't think Prince Kymar needed an increase in utility or power creep, but Prince Kymar, a lot of people forget this as well. Kymar does have the ability to sleep. He's going to do the AoE buff strip and then also place a sleep after that. Pretty insane ability, a very underrated ability here for Kymar. A lot of people remember him for the cooldown reset, but this A2 that is an AoE buff strip and place a CC sleep, 100% chance on a 3 turn cooldown, is very insane. So Kymar, as well as Sify, is probably going to be pretty popular in this dungeon for the ability to lower cooldowns, place poisons, and then do the sleep as well here on the A2. So yeah, that's all the champions that are placing sleep that I was able to gather up in my research. If I missed any, definitely let me know down below, and I'll be willing to correct that or add that to the list as we do more guides here for this upcoming dungeon. But the ones that stand out to me the most in terms of looking out for would probably be like a Seducer as a rare champion. I think that could be a good option to invest in because a pretty decent rare and has the ability to place a decently reliable sleep. And then there was also a couple epics in like Thenasil, Zelatah. Maybe I think Thenasil might be slightly better, but Zelatah does have a very reliable sleep. And then obviously you've got like Sify and Kymar with the ability to do it, and they're already insane legendaries as is. So let me know which ones stand out to you, and if you agree or disagree with me on that assessment. Always enjoy hearing as much input as possible, especially when we've got new mechanics in the game to dive into. So yeah, remember to subscribe on your way out if you enjoy daily Raid Shadow Legends content, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Peace.